Cranky Craig Hendry tries not to get arrested at a courthouse in Illinois. Floyd Wallace wants to have your baby in his never-ending series of live streams. Plus, will you pay Chili DeCastro $10 just to watch his YouTube shorts on Patreon? What? All this and more on today's edition of Auditing Insanity. Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Auditing Insanity Newscast. I'm Jim Finch and I'll be your host as we cover three big news stories featuring Floyd Wallace, Craig Hendry, and Delete Law's Chili DeCastro. Please note that for one of our stories tonight, we briefly feature someone talking about self-harm and what they would do when they have thoughts of self-harm. We're not making light of the subject, despite our overall light coverage of the individual. It is a serious issue, and if you are someone with thoughts of self-harm in the United States who needs to talk to someone, please dial 988 on your phone. As the subject of the video makes clear, sometimes you just need to talk, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. You're never alone, and we encourage anyone with dark thoughts to take advantage of any services that are available to you. With that, we ask you to focus on Delete Law's DeCastro's decline continues. Recently reminiscing on life, Jose Chili DeCastro, aka Delete Laws, stated that he was once viewed by millions of people a month, he had tremendous influence, and he was recognized wherever he went and was now just a normal person because of the horrific shadow banning undertaken by YouTube and a conspiracy by social media companies to hold him down. DeCastro indicated that because of this massive conspiracy, he needed all of his supporters to immediately make the jump to his new Patreon to see his uncensored material at a cost of $10 a month for membership or $10 per video without a membership. The Sly DeCastro so far has released minute-long YouTube shorts on the new Patreon as his primary releases, meaning that it is more likely that part of his faithful have already paid $10 for a 1-minute video. As of Monday morning, his mass departure from YouTube has brought him a grand total of 35 total members, 4 paid memberships, and an estimate of making $36 a month from the Patreon from paid memberships. DeCastro has yet to put out any of the content from his YouTube channel onto his new Patreon account, including all of the live streams from this weekend. He also added none of the content from American Patriot Forever or anything more than the 2 YouTube shorts that are not exclusive to the platform. Patreon does not allow for direct live streaming on the service through the Patreon software. Live streaming is done through other software, and while you can have a live stream post, that link will always be a pass-through to another provider. With DeCastro's current setup, he'd be mirroring his YouTube live streams at best, with no advantage other than the possibility to monetize the link on Patreon to non-members. His only option would be to make every live stream unlisted on YouTube and then providing the link on Patreon. It would be hard to find a way that the work of offering live streams live on Patreon would ever be worth it for DeCastro. Which brings us to DeCastro's current YouTube content, not yet available to his paid members on Patreon. DeCastro streams Sunday night, featuring essentially old video footage of police officers acting in ways DeCastro disagreed with. The live stream started with a 25-minute video featuring an ancient DeCastro encounter with police and ended with DeCastro's apparent sociopathic tendencies in an old video from American Patriot. The YouTuber announced he was still carrying 20 pounds of fat from jail, but then, even out of shape, a trained fighter in his 30s might be able to take him out. Maybe. He said that his new studio in Los Angeles was almost done, and he was putting a toilet and plumbing in this week. Finally, he would be announcing action involving Justice of the Peace Ann Zimmerman later this week. DeCastro's announcements had no impact on the GoFundMe market, which he claims he's pulled out of, as our own ongoing expenses fund tied with Long Island Audit's Support the Fight Against Tyranny and Corruption campaign, both taking in $10 for Sunday. On that same subject, if you'd like to lift our spirits and help us with our ongoing expenses as we recover from 5 Floyd Wallace live streams in 3 days, or to keep the bastard Jim Finch writing this dreadful column each day, you can contribute to the GoFundMe run by this very channel. All proceeds go to keeping the lights on, eating, and writing new stories to feature here and on ReallyCoolPsych.org. Wallace announces plans to procreate. In a whirlwind of emotions and announcements over the past few days, an increasingly desperate Floyd Wallace has been live streaming near constantly as he attempts to raise $78 he says he needs to pay for the second half of his Airbnb payment. It's unclear if he means for a second Airbnb to use as a decoy for his next trip to Colombia, which is currently scheduled for October 25th, or if it's the second half of the payment due for the Airbnb that he said he was paying for on one of his many live streams over the weekend. Wallace has increasingly turned to constant live streaming as a source of solace over the past week. At one point during a stream, pulling out a self-harm prevention hotline card and telling his fans that he had dark thoughts, but it was okay because the hotline is there for when he needs to talk, as he has no real friends. The YouTuber explained that he has permanent mental illness and at one point was getting disability from the United States federal government of a $1,000 a month check to help him with living expenses. That payment ended as he made too much money from his YouTube channels, and he claimed that he had been unsuccessfully fighting to get the payment back now that his YouTube fame has diminished. Wallace, on the same stream, showed off his bedroom in his current apartment. He said that he had destroyed his bed frame by falling on it, and that he didn't own sheets or a blanket because he was poor. He told his audience that he slept in his clothes and that he was never cold. It is of note that Wallace has been wearing the same green shirt and jeans since Friday, despite 3 days passing. He also revealed that he was increasingly dependent on wearing his prescription glasses as his, quote, eye vision was going away. Turning to the near future, Wallace revealed that he wanted to have children in the near future and that the children would live in whatever third world country he was living in at the moment. In the past, Wallace marveled about how easy it would be to escape responsibility for children born outside the United States, as there were no real child support laws that he was aware of that would apply to Americans. It is unclear if Wallace, who is currently planning on leaving the United States for a year-long extended sex tour of Colombia and Brazil, was serious about the possibility of abandoning an offspring. However, Wallace has become increasingly reflective of his sexual conquests, claiming to bed over 100 women and wondering how none of them have become pregnant with his child. Turning to his plans at Colombia, he assured his followers that despite hiring the woman known as the Stud to be his personal driver during his time in the country, she will not be on camera other than in passing. She made the request not to be featured, following backlash from Wallace's followers, who wanted to see him bed someone hotter. There has also been some clarification as to his status for his charges in Oklahoma. Wallace is now set for plea and sentencing on Tuesday, November 12, 2024 in Norman, Oklahoma, on a single charge of obstructing an officer. Wallace is currently scheduled to take a blind plea at the hearing. A blind plea is like a no contest where Wallace will admit his guilt and then essentially beg the judge to go easy on him based on mitigating circumstances. This typically happens when an official plea deal can't be reached with the prosecutor, and both sides allow the judge to determine what punishment Wallace will receive. The current charge carries a maximum of 1 year in jail and a $500 fine under Oklahoma law. Adding a twist to this comes Wallace's latest claims that he will be filing his current attorney specifically to delay the hearing, openly stating that he'd rather have a January court date as not to interrupt his sex tour of Colombia. He then would be able to go to Brazil, which he claims he is eligible to return in mid-January, for his planned 9-month sex tour once he served whatever time, if any, he received from the sentencing from his current case. Wallace has already live streamed again since we've gone to press, and we'll have coverage of that stream in tomorrow's edition of Auditing Insanity. Aggressive Henry confronts security. First Amendment Auditor Craig Henry released a produced video on Sunday featuring a screaming confrontation between Henry and a security guard at a courthouse in Olney, Illinois, as the security guard attempted to stop him from entering a private area of the building. Henry became aggressive when a security guard asked him not to go past a security station at the back of the building in order to access the city clerk's office. The YouTuber started to scream at the officer that if he touched Henry, Henry would respond to protect himself, and indicated that he would knock the security guard down with one punch. The security guard remained calm in the situation, while Henry continued to scream and protest not being allowed in the private area. To de-escalate the situation, the county clerk stepped in and brought Henry into her office, where Henry attempted to make a FOIA request. The clerk explained that all the FOIA requests in the county were handled online, as Henry pretended that he did not have access to a computer at home and insisted that the clerk print out a copy of the FOIA form. Henry's continued filming in the private area resulted in the workers in that area protesting Henry's filming of them, denying consent to be filmed, which Henry laughed at and then left the private office. After a jump cut, a local police officer was on the scene. The YouTuber told the officer that it was for your benefit, that he was only filing a verbal report and not a written report. He again said he'd defend himself any way he felt fit if anyone, including the police officer, touched him, as he filed a verbal complaint against the security officer for originally blocking him from accessing the court clerk's private office. The YouTuber then challenged the idea that there are private areas in a public building, such as the courthouse, to the police officer, and that he believed that as a taxpayer who helped pay for the building, there should be no areas that are off limits to him or his camera. Henry then filmed himself going up to the second floor, where he encountered a judge who promptly threw him out of the building for recording. The encounter with the judge or ejection from the building was not featured on Henry's video. The YouTuber explained that there was a 25-minute cut as he dealt with the ramifications of the judge's illegal action. He then re-entered the building and complained loudly to the police officer that in Illinois law, the same law he tried to apply to his contempt charges in Indiana for filming in a courtroom, gave him the right to film anywhere he pleased, including within the court. Attempting to de-escalate the situation, the police officer gave Henry his business card, and Henry promised to email him the law that proved everything he was saying was correct, and that the police officer would soon agree with him and stop enforcing the judge's illegal orders. Henry himself declined to challenge the judge's orders, explaining to his friend on the scene that he had already been persecuted in Indiana by authorities and could not afford an arrest in Illinois before ending the video. And we're back. Just to wrap up here, as we've already had almost 3 more hours of Floyd Wallace to sit through before the inevitable 4-hour-long Delete Laws broadcast. Not much fun for us in the near future, but we'll have reports on them tomorrow. We also had a setback today that caused us to spend time back in bed as we jump back into the flow of things a bit too quickly, since we are still recovering from everything over the past week. With that, we're gearing up to be ready to go to bed early tonight, and we'll slowly be preparing to get back into the world of man. Maybe, if only there were ice cream. Good night, everyone.